Kyle Morrison stood at the window of his small quarters, watching the twin suns set over the mountain peaks of Scaleheim. The dragon homeworld was beautiful in a harsh, ancient way. Everything here was built from stone and metal, designed to last forever. Nothing soft, nothing gentle. That was the dragon way. "Daddy, look what I made," Emma called from across the room. Kyle turned and smiled. His 6-year-old daughter held up a drawing she had made with the colored pencils he had brought from Earth. It showed a little girl holding hands with a dragon. The dragon had a smile that took up half its face. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Kyle said, kneeling down to her level. "Is that you and Teshal?" Emma nodded, her brown curls bouncing. "He said he would show me the crystal caves tomorrow. Can I go, Daddy? Please?" Kyle hesitated. Teshal was young for a dragon, only about 30 years old, but he was kind to Emma. Still, the dragon elders did not fully approve of humans on their world. The cultural exchange program was barely tolerated. "We'll see," Kyle said, "but right now it's almost bedtime." "But Daddy, the ceremony is tonight," Emma said, her eyes wide. "Teshal said there would be music and lights in the valley. Can't we watch from the balcony?" Kyle had forgotten about the choosing of hatchling ceremony. It was one of the most sacred events in dragon culture. Once every 10 years, the elders gathered to assess the young dragons and determine their future paths. Warriors, scholars, builders, each dragon's destiny was decided by the Council of Elders. "All right," Kyle agreed. "But just for a little while. Ach, then bed." Emma squealed with joy and ran to the balcony. Kyle followed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The evening air was getting cold. Below them, the ceremonial valley was filling with dragons. Their massive forms moved like living mountains, scales glinting in the firelight. The elders sat on raised platforms, 3 of them, Vorthok, Cezrin, and Kalmora. They were the oldest and most powerful dragons on Scaleheim. Kyle had met them once, briefly, when he first arrived 6 months ago. They had looked at him the way a human might look at an insect. Curious, but not particularly interested. "They're so pretty," Emma whispered, watching the flames dance in the ceremonial bowls. Kyle pulled her closer. "Yes, they are." They watched for 20 minutes as the ceremony began. Young dragons came forward one by one, each demonstrating their skills. Some breathed fire in complex patterns. Others showed their strength by lifting enormous stones. The elders watched in silence, occasionally nodding or making notes. "Daddy, I'm sleepy," Emma said, rubbing her eyes. "Okay, princess, let's get you to bed." Kyle carried her inside and tucked her into bed. He read her favorite story about a brave knight and a friendly dragon. By the end, her eyes were closed, her breathing soft and steady. Kyle kissed her forehead. "Good night, my little star." He left the door slightly open, the way she liked it, and went to his small office to finish some reports. The cultural exchange program required constant documentation. What the dragons ate, how they communicated, their social structures, everything had to be recorded and sent back to Earth. An hour passed. Kyle was deep in his work when he heard a sound. A door opening. He looked up. Emma's room was empty. His heart jumped into his throat. "Emma?" No answer. Kyle ran through the quarters, checking every room. She wasn't there. He rushed to the balcony. The ceremony was still going on below, but Emma was nowhere to be seen. Then he saw it. The small door that led to the servants' passages. It was open. Emma must have woken up and wandered out, probably curious about the ceremony. Kyle grabbed his jacket and ran into the passages. They were narrow corridors carved into the mountain, used by the few non-dragon workers on Scaleheim. He followed them down, his mind racing. Emma had been having trouble sleeping lately. Sometimes she would sleepwalk, especially when she had nightmares about the colony disaster. On the disaster that had killed her birth parents and left her alone in the ruins. Kyle had found her 3 months after the explosion at Colony Station Meridian. He was part of the rescue team, searching through the wreckage. He heard crying from under a collapsed building. When he pulled away the debris, there she was, dirty, scared, but alive. She had looked up at him and said, "Are you here to take me home?" Kyle's heart had broken and mended in the same moment. "Yes," he had said. "I'm here to take you home." The adoption process had been difficult. Single men rarely adopted, especially in the military. But Kyle had fought for her. He had filled out every form, attended every hearing, and convinced every official. Emma was his daughter now, in every way that mattered. Kyle emerged from the passages into the ceremonial valley. When the ceremony was reaching its peak, hundreds of dragons filled the space, their attention focused on the three elders and the young dragon currently demonstrating his fire-breathing skills. Then Kyle saw her. Emma, in her white nightgown, walking through the crowd of dragons. She was heading toward the ceremonial platform, drawn by the pretty lights and colors. No one had noticed her yet. She was so small compared to the massive dragons. Kyle started running, but he was too far away. Emma reached the platform steps and began to climb. She wanted to see better. That's when Elder Vorthak noticed her. His massive head turned, his golden eyes widening in shock and anger. "A human child," he rumbled, his voice like thunder, "in the sacred circle." The ceremony stopped. Every dragon turned to look. Emma froze on the steps, suddenly realizing she had made a mistake. Elder Cesarin rose from his seat, his scales glowing red with anger. "This is an outrage. Remove the creature." Elder Kalmora, the eldest female, extended her massive claw toward Emma. Kyle's blood ran cold. He pushed through the crowd of dragons, his heart pounding. Kalamora's claws closed around Emma's small body, lifting her off the ground. Emma cried out, frightened and confused. That's when Kyle arrived. He stepped between the elder and the edge of the platform, his body tense, his eyes locked on the dragon holding his daughter. "Don't touch my child," Kyle whispered. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a blade. The three elders froze. They had never heard a human speak with such controlled intensity. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was a simple statement of absolute fact. Kyle stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, but every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring. He was not a large man. He was not armed. He stood less than 6 feet tall, facing creatures that measured their height in dozens of feet. But in that moment, facing three of the most powerful beings on the planet, Kyle Morrison did not move, did not blink, did not back down. Elder Kalmora slowly lowered Emma to the ground. The little girl ran to her father, wrapping her arms around his legs, crying softly. Kyle picked her up, holding her close to his chest. His eyes never left the elders. The entire ceremonial valley was silent. Hundreds of dragons watched, stunned, as a single human stood his ground against the council of elders. Vorthak's eyes narrowed. "You dare challenge us? Ya human?" Kyle's voice remained calm, steady. "I dare protect my child." The silence in the ceremonial valley felt like a living thing. Every dragon watched Kyle Morrison holding his daughter, waiting to see what would happen next. Emma buried her face in her father's shoulder, her small body shaking. Elder Vorthak descended from the platform, his massive form casting shadows across the ground. Each step he took made the earth tremble slightly. He was over 200 feet long, his scales the color of old bronze, marked with scars from centuries of battles. "You do not understand what you have done, human," Vorthak said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The choosing ceremony has not been interrupted in 3,000 years. This is sacred ground, sacred time." Kyle shifted Emma in his arms, keeping her close. "What? I understand my daughter made a mistake. She's 6 years old. She didn't know." "Ignorance is not an excuse," Elder Cesarin said, moving to stand beside Vorthak. His scales were deep red, almost black in places. "She has violated our most ancient tradition." "She's a child," Kyle repeated, his voice still calm but firm. "Children make mistakes. They wander. They get curious. That's what children do." Elder Kalamora, the female elder, tilted her massive head. Her scales were silver white, marking her as the oldest of the three. "You speak as if this matters, human, as if her youth changes the nature of the violation." "It changes everything," Kyle said. A murmur went through the crowd of dragons. Several of them shifted, their scales rustling like metal sheets. They had never heard anyone speak to the elders this way. Mikhail had been on Scaleheim for 6 months. In that time, he had learned the dragon way. Strength was everything. Honor was everything. They respected power and tradition above all else. They did not understand softness or forgiveness. But Kyle didn't care about the dragon way right now. He only cared about Emma. The ceremony must be purified, Vorthak declared. The child must be punished for the intrusion. 3 days in the correction chambers, as is traditional for those who violate sacred spaces. Kyle's grip on Emma tightened. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Cesarin's eyes blazed. You refuse the judgment of the council? I refuse to let you punish a 6-year-old child for walking into a place she didn't understand was forbidden, Kyle said. If someone needs to be punished, punish me. I'm her father. I'm responsible for her. Kalamora moved closer, her ancient eyes studying Kyle with new interest. You would accept her punishment? Yes, Kyle said, without hesitation. 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. Whatever you decide, but Emma goes free. Emma lifted her head from Kyle's shoulder, tears streaming down her face. Daddy, no, she whispered. Kyle kissed her forehead. It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's okay. He thought back to the day he found her in the ruins of Colony Station Meridian. The rescue mission had been declared hopeless after 2 months. Everyone believed there were no survivors. But Kyle had insisted on one more search. He had been walking through the collapsed residential section when he heard it. A soft crying sound, so faint he almost missed it. He had dug through the rubble for 4 hours, moving pieces of metal and concrete with his bare hands until they bled. When he finally reached her, Emma had been curled up in a small pocket of space, surrounded by debris. She had survived on emergency rations from a broken supply locker and water from a cracked pipe. Are you here to take me home? She had asked him. Kyle had realized in that moment that his life had just changed forever. This little girl, alone and scared, needed him. And somehow, he needed her too. The adoption process had been long and difficult. Military regulations didn't encourage single-parent adoptions. His commanding officer had questioned his judgment. The psychologist had made him attend countless sessions to prove he was ready for the responsibility. But Kyle had never doubted. From the moment he pulled Emma from those ruins, she was his daughter. Now, standing in a valley full of dragons, facing creatures that could kill him with a single breath of fire, Kyle felt that same certainty. He would protect Emma no matter what. A young dragon pushed through the crowd. Kyle recognized him immediately. Teshal, the dragon who had befriended Emma. Elders, please, Teshal said, his voice respectful but urgent. The human child meant no harm. She has been kind to many of us. She shares her food, teaches us her games, shows us drawings of her world. Another young dragon emerged, this one female, Mirazin, with scales the color of deep ocean water. It is true, honored elders. The small human brings joy. She laughs and plays. She is not like the adult humans who are always serious and formal. Vorthak turned his gaze to the young dragons. Joy and play are not relevant to matters of sacred law. But shouldn't they be? Teshal asked quietly. The elders stared at him. Dragons did not question their elders. It simply wasn't done. Before anyone could respond, a human voice called out from the edge of the valley. Commander Morrison? Lieutenant Amy Chen ran toward them, her face flushed from running. She was Kyle's colleague, the other human assigned to the cultural exchange program. She stopped when she saw the scene, her eyes widening. Lieutenant Chen, Vorthak acknowledged, you arrive at an unfortunate time. Amy looked at Kyle, at Emma crying in his arms, at the 3 massive elders looming over them. She understood the situation immediately. Honored elders, Amy said, bowing respectfully. I apologize for this disruption. Our Commander Morrison and his daughter are still learning our ways. Perhaps we could discuss this matter privately, away from the ceremony. There is nothing to discuss, Cesarin said. Sacred law has been broken. Justice must be served. What justice? Kyle asked, his voice hard now. You want to lock up a little girl for 3 days because she wandered into the wrong place? What kind of justice is that? It is dragon justice, Kalmora said simply. It has served us for millennia. Then maybe your justice is wrong, Kyle said. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Amy closed her eyes, knowing Kyle had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Vorthak drew himself up to his full height, his wings spreading wide. You dare judge our ways, human? You who have been on our world for mere months. I dare judge any system that would harm a child, Kyle said, meeting the elder's gaze without flinching. Kalamora stepped forward, her silver scales gleaming in the firelight. You are either very brave or very foolish, Kyle Morrison. I'm just a father, Kyle said quietly. The elder studied him for a long moment. Something shifted in her ancient eyes, though Kyle couldn't read what it meant. The council will deliberate, Kalmora announced. Kyle Morrison and the child Emma will be held until judgment is rendered. They will appear before the full Dragon Council at dawn tomorrow. All 12 elders? Amy asked, her voice worried. All 12, Vorthak confirmed. This matter is now beyond our authority alone. 2 younger dragons moved forward to escort Kyle. He held Emma tighter. How will you hurt them? Teshal asked, positioning himself protectively near Kyle. We will hold them, Kalmora said. Nothing more. You have my word. Kyle looked at the ancient dragon. In her eyes, he saw something he hadn't expected. Not anger, not contempt, but curiosity. Okay, Kyle said. We'll come peacefully. He followed the escort dragons, Amy walking beside him, Teshal and Mirasin trailing behind. Emma clung to his neck, whispering, I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. Shh, Kyle whispered back. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing at all. As they left the ceremonial valley, Kyle heard the murmur of hundreds of dragons discussing what they had just witnessed. A human standing up to the elders. A human choosing punishment over letting his child be harmed. Tomorrow, Kyle would face the full Dragon Council. Need 12 of the oldest, most powerful dragons on Scaleheim. But tonight, he held his daughter close and promised himself that no matter what happened, she would be safe. That was all that mattered. The holding chamber was not a prison exactly. It was a circular room carved from the mountain itself, with a high ceiling and a single large window that showed the stars. A simple bed had been brought in for Emma, along with some blankets. Kyle sat beside her, stroking her hair as she finally fell asleep. Amy Chen sat across from them, her face tight with worry. Kyle, do you understand what you've done? The full Dragon Council hasn't convened in over 50 years. The last time was when 2 dragon clans went to war. I know, Kyle said quietly, not wanting to wake Emma. They could expel us from Scaleheim. They could end the entire cultural exchange program. Years of work, gone. I know that too. Amy sighed. Then why? Why couldn't you just apologize, promise it wouldn't happen again, accept some minor penalty? Kyle looked down at Emma's sleeping face. Because she's my daughter, and no one touches my daughter. She's not really your daughter, though, Amy said, then immediately regretted it when she saw Kyle's expression. I mean, legally she is, but biologically. Biology doesn't matter, Kyle said firmly. She's mine. I'm hers. That's all there is to it. Amy was quiet for a moment. The dragons don't understand that, Kyle. They don't have adoption. Their young are raised by whoever is assigned to raise them, usually the mother, but if she dies, any female dragon takes over. It's duty, not choice. They don't understand choosing to love a child that isn't yours by blood. Then maybe they need to learn, Kyle said. Before Amy could respond, the door opened. Teshal ducked his head into the room, his young face anxious. Commander Morrison, the council will see you now. Dawn has come. Kyle looked out the window. The twin suns were just beginning to rise over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He gently moved Emma to the bed, tucking the blankets around her. She stirred, but didn't wake. I'll stay with her, Amy promised. Kyle nodded and followed Teshal out of the chamber. They walked through long corridors carved into the mountain, heading toward the Grand Scales Chamber, the place where the Dragon Council met. Commander Morrison, Teshal said quietly as they walked. I have never seen anyone stand up to the elders like you did. It was impressive. It was necessary, Kyle said. The other young dragons are talking about it, about how you protected Emma. We don't understand it fully, but Teshal paused. It moved something in us, made us think. They reached the massive doors of the Grand Scales chamber. Two guard dragons stood on either side, their scales polished to a mirror shine. They opened the doors without a word. Kyle stepped inside and stopped, overwhelmed by the sight. The chamber was enormous, carved from a single piece of mountain. 12 platforms ringed the room, each one holding an ancient dragon. These were the eldest of the eldest, the most powerful beings on Scaleheim. Some had scales that gleamed like precious metals. Others had scales dulled by age and countless battles, or all of them radiated authority. In the center of the room was a small platform, clearly meant for Kyle. He walked to it, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He climbed onto the platform and stood straight, meeting the gaze of each elder in turn. Vorthak spoke first. Kyle Morrison, human. You stand before the Dragon Council charged with defiance of sacred law and disrespect to the elders. How do you answer? I don't deny what I did, Kyle said clearly. But I deny that it was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the council. Cezrin leaned forward, his red scales catching the light. You admit your guilt but claim innocence? Explain yourself, human. Kyle took a breath. My daughter Emma made a mistake. She's 6 years old. She saw something beautiful and wanted to see it closer. That's what children do. They're curious. They don't always understand rules they haven't been taught clearly. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, another elder said. This one had scales like burnished copper. For an adult, no, Kyle agreed. But Emma is a child. Children learn by making mistakes. They need patience in teaching, not punishment. Kalmora, the silver-scaled elder, spoke next. Her voice was softer than the others, but no less powerful. You offered to take her punishment. Why? Kyle met her ancient eyes. Because I'm her father. It's my job to protect her. But she is not of your bloodline, Kalmora said. We have learned this. She is not your biological offspring. Why do you call her daughter? Because I chose her, Kyle said simply, and she chose me. The elders looked at each other, confusion evident on their massive faces. Another elder spoke, this one with dark green scales. Explain this choosing. We do not understand. Kyle thought about how to make them understand. On my world, family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's about love, about commitment. I found Emma after a disaster killed her birth parents. She was alone and scared. When I saw her, something in my heart told me she was meant to be my daughter. So I chose to adopt her, to raise her as my own, to love her as my own. But why? The copper-scaled elder asked. What benefit does this bring you? She cannot carry on your genetic line. She costs resources to raise. What do you gain? Kyle smiled slightly. Everything. I gain everything. Emma makes my life better just by being in it. Her laugh, her curiosity, her trust in me. These things are more valuable than anything else. Vorthak shook his massive head. Yes, this is sentiment, weakness. Dragons do not make decisions based on feelings. Then maybe that's why you don't understand, Kyle said. Because feelings aren't weakness. Love isn't weakness. The need to protect those we care about. That's one of the strongest forces in the universe. Kalmora leaned forward, her silver eyes intense. When did you know this child was yours? At what moment did you decide? Kyle didn't hesitate. The moment I heard her crying in the rubble, my heart decided before my head could question it. And if we had punished her yesterday, another elder asked, what would you have done? Kyle's voice was steady and sure. Whatever I had to do to keep her safe. Even if it meant your death? Kalmora asked. Even then, Kyle said. The chamber fell silent. The 12 elders looked at this small human standing on the platform, completely unafraid, completely honest. Finally, Cezrin spoke. We have raised our young for thousands of years. When a dragon dies, another takes their place caring for the hatchling. It is duty. It is responsibility. But we have never called it love. We have never chosen it. Do you regret that? Kyle asked quietly. The red-scaled elder seemed taken aback by the question. He didn't answer. Kalmora rose from her platform, descending to the floor of the chamber. She approached Kyle, her massive form towering over him. He didn't move. I will tell you something, Kyle Morrison, she said. Something I have never told another soul. 200 years ago, I found a hatchling dying in the wilderness. Its mother had been killed by rockfall. I nursed it back to health. I cared for it for 3 months. She paused, pain flickering across her ancient face. I wanted to keep it, to raise it as my own. But the law said it must go to the assigned caretakers. So I gave it away. I have wondered about that hatchling for 2 centuries. I do not even know if it still lives. Kyle saw the regret in her eyes. The loss. I'm sorry, he said softly. I followed the law, Kalmora said. I did my duty. But was I right to do so? That is a question I have carried ever since. She turned to face the other elders. This human has shown us something we have forgotten, or perhaps something we never knew. He has shown us that choosing to love is not weakness. It is strength. Forthak rumbled deep in his chest. You would change our ways based on one human sentiment? I would consider whether our ways have missed something important, Kalmora replied. Another elder, one with pale blue scales, spoke up. What of the young dragons who have lost their parents in the border conflicts? They are raised in the communal nurseries. They are fed, educated, trained. But are they loved? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Kyle watched as the ancient dragons looked at each other, something shifting in their expressions. Doubt, curiosity, perhaps even longing. We will deliberate, Kalmora announced. Kyle Morrison, you will return to the holding chamber. We will summon you when we have reached our judgment. Kyle bowed slightly and turned to leave. As he walked toward the door, Kalmora called out, Human, your daughter, yet does she know how much you would sacrifice for her? Kyle turned back. I tell her every day, and I show her every day. She knows. The silver-scaled elder nodded slowly. That is good. Kyle left the chamber, his heart pounding. He had no idea what the council would decide, but he had spoken his truth. He had defended Emma with everything he had. Now, all he could do was wait and hope that somehow his words had reached these ancient beings. Kyle walked back to the holding chamber, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. Teshal walked beside him, silent and thoughtful. When Kyle entered the room, Emma was awake, sitting on Amy's lap. Her eyes were red from crying. Daddy, she called out, running to him. Kyle scooped her up, holding her tight. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. Are they going to take you away? Emma asked, her voice small and frightened. I don't know, Kyle said honestly. He had never lied to Emma, and he wouldn't start now. But no matter what happens, I want you to remember something. You are my daughter. You will always be my daughter. Nothing can change that. Emma nodded against his chest. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, my little star. Amy stood up, giving them space. How did it go? I don't know, Kyle admitted. They're deliberating now. Elder Kalmora seemed different, like maybe she understood something. Hours passed slowly. Amy brought food and water. Emma drew pictures to pass the time, though her usual cheerfulness was gone. Kyle held her hand and told her stories about Earth, about the ocean and forests she had never seen. Finally, as the afternoon suns began to sink toward the horizon, the door opened. It wasn't Teshal this time. It was Kalmora herself, her massive form barely fitting through the doorway. Behind her stood Vorthok and Cezrin. Kyle stood up, positioning himself slightly in front of Emma. The council has reached a decision, Kalmora said. But before we deliver judgment, we have questions for the child. Kyle tensed. What kind of questions? Simple ones, Kalmora said. We wish to understand Will you allow it? Kyle looked down at Emma. She was scared, but she nodded bravely. Okay, Kyle said, but I stay with her. Of course, Kalmora agreed. The ancient dragon lowered herself to the ground, bringing her massive head closer to Emma's level. It was a gesture of respect that surprised Kyle. Child Emma, Kalmora said gently, I have a question for you. What is a father? Emma looked up at Kyle, then back at the dragon. She thought for a moment, her small face serious. A father is someone who keeps the monsters away, Emma said quietly. Even when he's scared too. Kalmora tilted her head. Explain, please. Emma took a deep breath. Sometimes I have bad dreams. About the day the station exploded. About being alone in the dark. When I wake up crying, Daddy comes to my room. He checks under the bed and in the closet for monsters. He says there are no monsters, but he checks anyway because it makes me feel safe. And he is scared? Kalmora asked. Not of monsters, Emma said. But sometimes, late at night, I hear him walking around our quarters. He checks all the doors and windows. Amy says he has bad dreams too about the day he found me. About almost being too late. Kyle felt his throat tighten. He didn't know Emma had noticed that. Vorthak leaned closer. What else does your father do? Emma's face brightened a little. He learned to braid my hair. He's not very good at it, but he tries really hard. He watched videos on his tablet for hours and hours. Now he does my hair every morning before breakfast. Cezrin, the red-scaled elder, spoke next. Why does he do this? Surely there are others who could braid better. Because I asked him to, Emma said simply. I told him I missed having my hair braided like my first mommy used to do. The next day, Daddy started learning. He said if it was important to me, it was important to him. Kyle remembered that day. Emma had been crying, looking at an old photo of her birth mother. She had mentioned the braids. Kyle had immediately pulled out his tablet and searched for tutorials. His first attempts had been terrible, but he had practiced on spare cables and ropes until he got better. Kalmora's eyes were soft now, something Kyle had never seen in a dragon before. Tell me, child, does your father ever make you do things you don't want to do? Emma nodded. All the time. He makes me eat vegetables even though I don't like them. He makes me go to bed even when I want to stay up. He makes me clean my room and practice my reading. And this makes you angry? Kalmora asked. Sometimes, Emma admitted. But Daddy says he does it because he loves me. He says parents have to make their kids do things that are good for them, even if the kids don't like it. And do you believe him? Vorthak asked. Emma looked up at Kyle with complete trust in her eyes. Yes, because even when he makes me do things I don't want to do, he always says, I love you, after. Always. Every single time. Kyle felt tears threatening to fall. He blinked them back. Cezrin moved closer, his massive head level with Emma now. What if your father was not there? What if he had to leave? Emma's face crumpled. No, he can't leave. He promised he would never leave me. But what if he had no choice? Cezrin pressed. Emma started to cry. Then I would be alone again, like in the ruins, like in the dark. I don't want to be alone. Kyle knelt down and pulled Emma into his arms. Shh, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. You should not make promises you cannot keep, human, Vorthak said, but his voice lacked its earlier harshness. I keep my promises to my daughter, Kyle said firmly. Always. Kalmora was quiet for a long moment, watching Kyle comfort Emma. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost wondering. I have lived for 800 years, she said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wars and peace, death and birth. But I have never seen what I see in this room right now. What do you see? Amy asked quietly from the corner. Love, Kalmora said simply. True, unconditional love. The kind that asks for nothing in return. The kind that sacrifices everything for another. She turned to Vorthak and Cezrin. We raise our young with duty and honor. We teach them strength and tradition. But do we teach them this? Do we show them this? Vorthak looked uncomfortable. It is not the dragon way. Perhaps it should be, Kalmora said. She turned back to Kyle and Emma. I will tell the council something now. Something they need to hear. We have made a mistake. For thousands of years, we have believed that emotion is weakness. That attachment is a liability. We have raised our young to be strong, but we have forgotten to teach them to love. Cezrin shifted his massive weight. You would change everything based on this human and his child? I would change everything based on what they have shown me is missing, Kalmora replied. Look at them. See how the child trusts her father completely. See how the father would die for his child without hesitation. This is not weakness. This is the strongest bond in the universe. Vorthok was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. The council has made its judgment, but perhaps we should reconsider. No, Kalmora said. Our judgment stands, but it is not what you expect. Kyle held Emma tighter, preparing for whatever came next. Kalmora looked at him with those ancient silver eyes. Kyle Morrison, the Dragon Council has reached a decision. We find no crime in your actions. Your daughter will not be punished. You will not be punished. Kyle felt relief flood through him. But, Kalmora continued, we have a request, an unprecedented request. What kind of request? Kyle asked carefully. We want to learn, Kalmora said. We want you to teach us about this thing you call family, this choosing to love. We have young dragons who have lost their parents in the border conflicts. They are raised in communal nurseries, given food and education, but nothing more. We want to know if there is a better way. Kyle stared at the ancient dragon, hardly believing what he was hearing. You want me to teach dragons about parenting? He asked. We want you to teach us about love, Kalmora corrected. About bonds that go beyond duty. About choosing to care for someone not because you must, but because you cannot imagine doing anything else. Emma looked up at Kyle. Can we help them, Daddy? Kyle looked at his daughter, then at the three massive dragons waiting for his answer. He thought about all the young dragons who were growing up without the kind of love Emma had. Without someone to check for monsters under their beds, without someone to learn to braid their hair. Yes, Kyle said. We can help them. Kalmora's eyes gleamed with something that might have been hope. Then let us begin. 3 days after the council's decision, Kyle stood in the communal nursery, looking at the rows of young dragons. There were 20 of them, all under 5 years old. They sat in organized lines, perfectly still, perfectly quiet. Their caretakers moved among them with efficiency but no warmth. Emma squeezed his hand. Daddy, why don't they play? I don't know, sweetheart, Kyle said, but maybe we can change that. Kalmora entered the nursery, her silver scales gleaming in the light. Behind her came several other dragons, including Teshal and Mirasin. Vorthok and Cezrin stood near the entrance, watching with cautious interest. These are our orphaned young, Kalmora explained. Their parents died in the territorial disputes with the northern clans. They are fed, sheltered, and educated. But as you can see, they lack something. Kyle could see it clearly. The young dragons looked healthy but sad. There was no joy in their eyes, no curiosity. They simply existed. They lack love, Kyle said quietly. One of the caretaker dragons, an older female with gray scales, spoke up. We provide everything they need. You provide everything for survival, Kyle corrected gently. But children need more than that. They need affection. They need to feel special. They need to know someone cares about them specifically, not just as a duty. How do we provide this? Kalmora asked. Kyle thought for a moment. First, they need individual attention. Each child needs to feel like they matter. On Earth, we have something called adoption. One person or family chooses a specific child to raise and love as their own. Teshal stepped forward. I would like to try this. I would like to choose a young one to raise. The caretaker dragon looked shocked. But you are young yourself, only 30 years old. You have no obligation to raise another's offspring. That's exactly the point, Kyle said. It's not about obligation, it's about choice. Teshal wants to do this. That makes all the difference. Teshal moved among the young dragons, looking at each one carefully. He stopped in front of a small dragon with bright orange scales. She was the smallest of the group, sitting alone at the end of the row. "This one," Teshal said. "What is her name?" The caretaker checked a tablet. "She has no name yet, just a designation, Hatchling 7. "She needs a name," Emma said, walking up to the small dragon. "Everyone needs a name." The young dragon looked at Emma with wide eyes, or she had never seen a human child before. "What should we call her?" Teshal asked. Emma thought for a moment. "She's orange like fire and small like a little flame. How about Ember?" Teshal's eyes brightened. "Ember, yes, that is a good name." He looked down at the young dragon. "From this day, you are Ember, and I am your guardian. I will care for you, teach you, and protect you." Ember stared at him, confused. "Why?" "Because I choose to," Teshal said simply. Over the next week, Kyle worked with the dragons to establish a new program. He brought in human child development specialists through video calls from Earth. He created guidelines for dragon adoption that respected their culture while incorporating the human concept of chosen family. More young dragons began to volunteer. Mirasin chose a young male dragon with blue scales, yes, naming him River. Other adult dragons, inspired by Teshal and Mirasin, stepped forward to adopt the orphaned young. But it wasn't easy. The dragons struggled with concepts that didn't come naturally to them. One afternoon, Kyle found Teshal sitting outside the nursery, looking frustrated. "What's wrong?" Kyle asked. "Ember asked me to play a game with her," Teshal said. "But I don't understand play. Dragons don't play. We train, we practice, we drill. But play? What is the purpose?" Kyle sat down beside the young dragon. Play is how children learn about the world. It's how they develop imagination and creativity. It's how they learn to solve problems and interact with others. But more than that, play is how you bond with your child. "Bond?" Teshal asked. "Spend time together doing something fun, something that makes you both happy. That's how Ember will learn to trust you. That's how she'll know you care." That evening, Kyle watched as Teshal tried to play with Ember. It was awkward at first. The large dragon didn't know how to make himself small and gentle. But slowly, he learned. He chased Ember around the courtyard, pretending she was faster than him. He hid behind rocks and let her find him. And when Ember laughed, really laughed, Teshal's eyes shone with joy. "I didn't know young ones could sound like that," Teshal said to Kyle later. "So happy, so free." "That's what childhood should be," Kyle said. Weeks turned into months. The adoption program grew. More dragons came forward to raise the orphaned young. The communal nurseries slowly emptied as children found individual homes and families. Kyle taught the dragons about bedtime routines, ours about reading stories, about comforting nightmares. He showed them how to celebrate birthdays and small achievements. He explained why children needed both rules and affection, structure and freedom. One day, Vorthak approached Kyle in the gardens. The bronze-scaled elder looked different somehow. Less rigid, less certain. "I owe you an apology, Kyle Morrison," Vorthak said. "When you stood before me in the ceremonial valley, I thought you were foolish. I thought emotion made you weak." "And now?" Kyle asked. "Now I see that I was the foolish one," Vorthak admitted. "I have watched Teshal with Ember. I have seen how she runs to him when she is frightened, how she shows him her accomplishments with pride, how she trusts him completely. This bond they share, it makes them both stronger, not weaker." Kyle smiled. "Ewan, I'm glad you see that." Vorthak hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I had a son once, long ago. He died in battle. I mourned him as was proper, then moved on as was expected. But I never stopped thinking about him, never stopped missing him." The old dragon's voice cracked. "I never told him I loved him. I never thought I needed to." Kyle put a hand on the dragon's massive claw. He knew. In whatever way dragons show love, I'm sure he knew. "Perhaps," Vorthak said, "but I will never have the chance to be certain." 6 months after that night in the ceremonial valley, Kalmora called Kyle to the Grand Scales chamber. This time, Emma came with him, holding his hand as they walked through the massive doors. The 12 elders were there, but the atmosphere was different. Less formal. Almost warm. "Kyle Morrison," Kalmora began, Yeah, but you came to our world as part of a cultural exchange. You were meant to observe and record our ways. Instead, you have changed us. I only showed you what was missing, Kyle said. You showed us love, Kalmora corrected. And in doing so, you have given our orphaned young something we could not: hope, family, joy. She descended from her platform, moving to stand before Kyle and Emma. The council has voted unanimously to establish the choosing ceremony. Once each year, any dragon may come forward to adopt a young one who has lost their parents. We will teach them what you have taught us. That family is not about blood or duty, but about choice and love. Emma beamed up at the ancient dragon. And, Kalmora continued, we wish to honor you with a title. From this day forward, you are Kyle Morrison, friend of the scales, and protector of the young. You have shown us that true strength comes not from power, but from the courage to love. Kyle felt his eyes burn with tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. There is one more thing, Kalmora said. She looked down at Emma. Young Emma, you were the first to show us what a child with love looks like. You showed us laughter and play and trust. For this, you also have our gratitude. Emma stepped forward bravely. Can I ask you something? Of course, little one. Do you think you could find that hatchling you saved? The one from 200 years ago? Maybe they would want to know you cared about them. Kalmora's eyes glistened. Perhaps I will try. Perhaps it is not too late. A year later, Kyle stood in the courtyard watching Ember chase Emma in a game of tag. Teshal laughed, a sound that would have been impossible 2 years ago. Other young dragons played nearby with their adoptive parents, the air filled with joy and laughter. Mirison approached with River, who was carrying a drawing he had made. Look, Commander Morrison, River said proudly. I drew my family. The picture showed a large blue dragon and a smaller blue dragon, side by side, surrounded by hearts. That's beautiful, Kyle said. Amy Chen walked over, smiling. You know, when we first came here, I thought this assignment would be boring. Just observing and recording. I never imagined we'd start a revolution. It wasn't a revolution, Kyle said, watching Emma laugh as Ember gently tagged her. It was just a father protecting his child. And changing an entire civilization in the process, Amy added. Or Kyle thought back to that night in the ceremonial valley. The moment he had whispered those words that stopped 3 dragon elders in their tracks. The moment everything changed. Don't touch my child, he murmured. What? Amy asked. Nothing, Kyle said. Just remembering. Emma ran over, breathless and happy. Daddy, can Ember come over for dinner tonight, please? Teshal joined them. I would be honored if you would join us as well, Commander. Only if you call me Kyle, he said. We're friends now. Family, almost. Family, Teshal repeated, testing the word. Yes, I like that. As the twin suns set over Scaleheim, Kyle held Emma's hand and walked toward their quarters, Teshal and Ember following behind. The fortress that had once echoed with only the sounds of duty and discipline now rang with children's laughter. One whispered sentence had changed everything. One father's love had taught an ancient race something they had forgotten, or perhaps never known. That love wasn't weakness. It was the strongest force in the universe. And family wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about choice, about commitment, about looking at another soul and saying, you are mine, and I am yours, and nothing will ever change that. Kyle looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Thank you, he whispered to the universe. Thank you for giving me Emma. Thank you for this chance to show what love can do. Emma squeezed his hand. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, my little star, Kyle said. Always and forever. And on Scaleheim, in a fortress carved from ancient stone, that love continued to grow, touching lives and changing hearts, on proving that the greatest strength of all was the courage to care.